testimony. I'm interested to know your reaction to his positions with regard to the diversification of the military.
Sure.
And DEI.
Thank you. One point that the general made with which I disagree is that diversity is our strength. I don't think there's any evidence for that, but definitions matter. Words matter, and we're losing touch with this. I would reject the notion that diversity is our strength based on DEI definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Merit-based, okay, I'm going to get away from that because if we're trying to find a unity of understanding, let me say this. Skill and performance matter in the military if you'd like to deter conflict and win our nation's wars, period. As a commander in the military, I had a black colonel fly across the country to promote me to lieutenant colonel because I loved the hell out of the guy and respect his views on the Federalist Papers, which he was teaching me after work hours, and because he was the best leader I've ever worked with. The best airman that I had working for me, incidentally, was a transgender airman. So don't bullshit me and say that you think you know what you're talking about. You've never served. You don't understand how this works. We care about performance in the military, period. You don't know what you're talking about. Most of the people in this room don't know what they're talking about. We need lethality in the military, period. All of the stuff you guys talk about, the men and women in uniform don't think about. They go play Call of Duty at night after they learn their mission and execute that mission, period. They don't know what you're talking about. They don't know what you're voting on. They don't care about your sexual preference. They don't care what you look like, and they don't care what the person next to them looks like, period. I'm a citizen of this country, and I can dislike you and criticize you all I want here, but our men and women in uniform cannot. And so I speak on their behalf when I say lethality matters, merit-based selection and promotions matter, and your ideology doesn't matter one bit. And we need to identify principles which will preserve our union and preserve the unity of the United States military. If we do not, we'll lose that union. And it's my contest, whatever Truman did decades ago. No, you ask your average military service member when Truman was the President of the United States, they can't even tell you. But my point is, they're focused on what's happened since the George Floyd riots. There are things that have happened in the last 3 years in our military that we're up here to testify about, not the things that happened 60 years ago. We're great today because of what we've done for the last half century in the fighting of the Cold War.
And Mr. Lohmeier, what has happened in the last 3 years that has caused lethality to deteriorate in the military?
There's been an overt politicization of the military workplace and the forcing of trainings that are anti-American, that criticize our founders, that allege that white supremacy is a problem within the military ranks, which has never been proven, and all of that rhetoric that occurred once Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin took office led to a bunch of moaning and bitching and complaining behind closed doors of our service members, and I heard it as a commander. And so I wrote a formal written IG complaint about it that was dismissed by senior leaders because they were afraid of the political and racial climate that we've created in this country. And so they were afraid to hold one another accountable for their politics. Senior leaders. So they're not held accountable for their political worldview, but young people will be held accountable. I'm living evidence and a living example of the fact that the diversity initiatives are discriminatory. I was kicked out for saying I'd like to depoliticize the workplace, not for advocating for Republicanism, or excuse me, small r, Republican, not for advocating for Republican candidates, not for criticizing Democrat candidates. I never publicly advocated for anyone politically, but I was forced out because of viewpoint discrimination. Diversity initiatives are discriminatory, and inclusion initiatives are exclusive of my viewpoint. So, and so I'm living evidence that the politicization of the military workplace in the past several years is discriminatory, and it discriminates specifically against conservatism and Christianity, period.
Mr. Chairman, I want to submit for the record something called Declaration of Military Accountability, an open letter to the American people from signatories of the Declaration of Military Accountability into the record.
So entered.
And then I apologize.